Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson's decision not to run for the U.S. Senate in North Carolina in 2022 certainly has an impact on Tar Heel politics. It also could affect the state of education in North Carolina schools. Joining us to explain why is Dr. Terry Stoops. He is the director of the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. And Terry, this is a political story. Mark Robinson deciding not to run for Senate. Why should people who are interested in education also be interested in this news?
Sure. Well, first let me say hallelujah. I'm glad that he decided not to run for Senate. I think we need him here in North Carolina, and I think it's absolutely critical that we have his voice really be at the forefront in education policy. The lieutenant governor sits on the State Board of Education, and so if he was elected to the Senate, we would be missing that critical voice on the State Board of Education, as well as the Community College Board. But Mark Robinson has really made education one of the centerpieces of his term so far as lieutenant governor, not only coming out strongly against the critical race theory social studies standards that were passed earlier this year, but with his facts task force. And this task force is something that I'm a part of, and it essentially gives parents the ability to flag some worrisome and indoctrinating material on a website for experts, content area experts, and educators to be able to review. And so we see just in the last few months, the first few months of his term, he's active in education and has been really one of North Carolina's leaders in making sure that North Carolina's children receive a sound basic education.
Would it be safe to say that Lieutenant Governor Robinson is providing a voice or providing a heightened attention on a voice that has been missing in North Carolina's educational debates?
I think so, and I think his voice really reflects the parents' voice, because we hear the voice of teachers, we hear the voices of school administrators and elected officials, and they all speak to various issues in our education system, and it usually are things like funding and other policy issues that we hear about year in and year out. What Lieutenant Governor brings to the table is really trying to empower parents in various ways. The task force is definitely one. He is a stalwart champion of school choice. And so his voice really reflects the parent's voice. And I think that that is probably something that has been missing in a lot of ways among our group of elected officials, who often are listening to anyone but parents when it comes to the trajectory of education policy in North Carolina. So I think that that is really what makes Mark Robinson different than other elected officials and different than other lieutenant governors. And I think that Dan Forest did a superb job as lieutenant governor. I think he had policy priorities, and he really executed those priorities to perfection. But Mark Robinson brings a different philosophy to the table and really brings a different approach to the table. And really the way that he is able to coalesce parents and conservatives together on education issues is unprecedented for the state.
Do you think that those who are interested in seeing education reform breathed a sigh of relief like you seem to have once you learned that Lieutenant Governor Robinson was not going to be focusing his attention on a Senate run?
Absolutely. And if you think about the decision with regard to education, if he was elected to the U.S. Senate, there really isn't much he's going to be able to do on education policy. The federal government contributes about roughly 10% of our education funds as a state, and it has a regulatory rule for sure. But if you're really going to make a difference in public education, it's going to be at the state level, which funds North Carolina's public schools at around 65% of its total funding. So if you're going to have an influence and impact in education, you don't go to Washington, D.C. In fact, Washington, D.C. usually just makes things worse. You stay in the state to focus on state-level issues where the money, the power, and the regulatory authority really provides the guidance and the roadmap for how education is conducted in the state. And I'm glad that his advisors told him to hold it out, stay in North Carolina, and hopefully they told him that if he wants to have a bigger impact on public education and public education policy, then North Carolina is the place to be, not Washington, D.C.
Dr. Terry Stoops is director of the Center for Effective Education at the John Locke Foundation. Thanks so much, Terry.
Thank you.